Welcome back to Mindkind Podcasts. This is Dr. Jo North returning to our platform. Mindkind continues to be a reflective space for anyone who wants to stay sane in our demanding world. Our intention is to inspire, motivate, and inform people of all ages interested in mental health and well-being. I'll be drawing on 35 years of practice as a psychotherapist, and we'll be looking at research and therapy along the way and talking with other experts in the field so we can draw on their skill. If something affects the mind, we'll be talking about it. So let's get on with today's podcast. Hi, Jo here again. Really looking forward to our podcast this week. I want to talk to you about something that affects us all, whether we're interested in our mental health or not, and that is the food that we put in our mouth and how that impacts on us psychologically and emotionally. So, here we go. We live in an environment now which can be quite confusing. We have all sorts of types of food to eat, and we have plenty of it if we're fortunate enough to live in the Northern Hemisphere or in a society where there's a lot of trade going on. I am mindful in this podcast that some countries do not have enough food to eat, and that is quite a different matter to what we're thinking about in our Western food environment. I could talk to you about the politics of enough food for everyone. I could talk to you about the geography. I could talk to you about the economy. I could talk to you about all sorts of things that impact on the food that we eat, because there's for sure multiple layers that influence our eating. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to actually talk about the choices of what we put in our mouths and what I've discovered about eating for health and well-being, and how we can resolve the current epidemic of problematic eating that goes on, addiction to ultra-processed food, people putting on weight very easily. More importantly, we're thinking about how we relate with our stomach and our body-mind, the connection between mind and body. That is what will serve you if you understand it well in the end. You know, we can all get into a bit of a state about jumping on the scales and the way that weight fluctuates. And many of us start to think about our relationship with our body at the point of the scale. This is not necessarily a healthy direction to go in for many, many reasons, because weight does fluctuate and because there's an automatic thinking tendency there to judge oneself about the number that is in front of us. And in a mind full of judgments, we're not going to start to make good choices about what is beneficial to us. So what I advocate and what I have learned, and what I'll soon be publishing in my new book, Foodsane, which is coming out on Kindle by June, is that we don't start there, but that we start with a more peaceful and mindful approach to notice what we are doing rather than what we feel we should be doing. So it's a journey of discovery to see what your habits are before you start slamming in there, restricting food, getting judgmental about yourself, about your size or your body weight, because it's for sure, these are the factors that will affect change. That you start from a place where you are right now, that you start with reality, and that you make progress from a position of strength. Also, that if you are going to slam yourself with a restrictive diet, which is what most people do, a knee-jerk restriction, you will probably not last on a diet for very long. And actually, it's not the right direction to go in. And there's a lot of science these days that's showing us that you really need to be going in a direction of thinking about managing your time frames around food rather than your calorie counting around food. And I've looked into a lot of the literature on this for my book, Foodsane, and I advocate that approach. So there's going to be a fundamental shift that you notice what you are doing with food and that you make a change, counting timeframes rather than counting calories. And that a lot of the science now tells us that calorie counting didn't do a lot for us, that food in and lots of exercise hasn't actually resolved weight problems for people over the last 50 years. And not only that, that many of you will have noticed, and including myself, which is why I ended up doing a big inquiry into all of this, that you just put weight back on again. And that's very depressing. It means that you fail and you don't feel good and you don't know why. And so we need to change the paradigm. We need to shift to a different place. And there's going to be a big shift for us all over the next 20 years with our eating patterns. This is the direction that we're going to be going in. So get ready. It's all going to be great. There is a way for you to get this relationship between mind, body, food, weight, absolutely 100% right. If you're just willing to start with a more compassionate attitude towards yourself, stop judging yourself for what's on the scale. Okay, to measure change by all means, but stop that judgment and stop thinking of the scale as the place to do all of this work, because it is not the place to do all of this work. And I'm aware that many people will come to this from different positions. So you might come to this from a position of just wanting a better relationship with your body because you want a better relationship with your life and your general mental health and well-being. You may come at this from a position of having had to take drastic measures to do something because you're very worried about weight gain. And this applies to men, women, and people who are in a gender fluid experience. Doesn't matter where you're coming from, but you may well have, for example, taken 2 weight loss drugs such as Ozempic and Wegovy, and you may perhaps even have had surgery to reduce your intake of food. So no judgments about that, absolutely none whatsoever. You're very brave if you've made those decisions, and you will have made progress, and that's absolutely fantastic. And by the way, shout out to those of you who may come at this from just a calorie counting position. Absolutely brilliant. You're making an effort. But the piece here is what goes on in your mind around food and your relationship with food. And that's the piece I want to address, because whatever position, whatever your choice and your motivation right now, ultimately it's got to be a long-term picture. And I think these weight loss drugs, there's a lot of positive science on them to say they're absolutely great for solving this problem quickly. And I know that people want this problem solved quickly. They're absolutely great for changing your habits around food, but there's probably a lot more in between that we've got to be thinking about. So the first thing to hold in mind is that if you are in the category of overweight or obese, I hate that word, but never mind. It's the general medical term for overweight. It's well respected view now in the medical profession, certainly in the United States, that it's not your fault, that obesity is starting to be categorized as a disease rather than a fault. And I think that one of the things that goes horribly wrong for people is they just start to feel full of shame and full of guilt and blame themselves. And the psychological impact of that is absolutely enormous. And it can't be dismissed that that will not help you to feel good about doing the right thing for yourself. But there's so many factors that the fact of the matter is that there's about one factor that's under your control, and that is what you choose to put in your mouth. But the factors of genetics, hormones, age, your life story, what you've been subjected to, your eating experience in childhood will have all primed you for a particular position. And that's well recognized. And that's why the medical profession are going to move into a space where weight loss drugs are going to be prescribed more easily. What I would say to you is that I'm doing this podcast on the basis that anyone taking the modern weight loss drugs is doing that under medical guidance, which is absolutely recommended, because the weight loss you will experience will be drastic and it will have a huge impact on your body. So be careful and be mindful and do get medical guidance on what is going on for you. So we can start from a position of taking away the blame. It's impossible to lift the stigma attached to being too heavy because it's been there for so long. And I know for a fact that so many people will have been subjected to teasing in childhood, feeling ashamed in childhood. And these things impact, and certainly you will read in Foodsane about my own experiences in childhood. And recently, in a podcast that I did with Jen Stevens, who, by the way, is really worth listening to her podcast, where she does intermittent fasting stories, which can easily be found online. What I said to her was, my whole personality was shaped around being an overweight child, that I started to adapt and adjust in order to defend myself from the terrible feelings that somehow I was inadequate and I didn't know how to solve the problem. So there's not a lot people can tell me, and I started writing about this by being absolutely honest about the impact of being overweight for most of my life and losing weight and gaining weight again. So first of all, the thing you need to start telling yourself is that the body you're in right now is just right for you right now, and start to embrace that. That you're going to be working and connecting with your mind and body more. Now, listen, I know what goes on in the mind of people who have got a weight problem. They want a solution and they want it now, and they feel so unhappy and desperate about it. So let me cut to the chase, okay? Because, I can chatter on for ages about the politics, philosophy, and psychology of weight loss, but I know that people want to get to the problem, and you can start to do that right now. I hope you'll read the book for more information. But essentially, the position I came to was that putting more gaps in your food intake so that your body can rest and recover and digest from food is what is going to work. And I've seen it work dramatically. And there are huge stories about people who have taken to intermittent fasting as a way to help them. Now, let's talk about fasting, and let's talk about the idea that may make you cringe and want to run away and say that's not for me, because I fully understand it. The first experience that comes to mind is that your tummy rumbles and you feel hungry. So let's talk about that. We know that fasting is part of a pattern of behavior that's been adopted over thousands of years by ancient civilizations, many, many religions, and peoples throughout the world as a way to respect their body. Essentially, it's a rest from the daily grind of digesting food. You can attach your religious story to that if you choose. You can attach your faith to that. Absolutely brilliant. There are many people of many different faiths who will tell you that the experience of cutting down on food made them feel great. There are a lot of studies now that demonstrate to us that gaps between food will help us. Okay, so let's talk about the hormones that start to kick in when you reduce your intake of food. Let's talk about the hunger hormone ghrelin. Ghrelin is this wonderful hormone in the stomach that stimulates food intake. Just saying the word makes me hungry and want to eat straight away. It's a good thing. We need to have that. We need to feel hunger. The problem with this is that many of the ultra-processed foods that we take in these days stimulate this hunger hormone. And the more we stimulate that hormone, the more it gets stimulated. So it could be that that's overworked in your stomach, and we need to think about that. The opposite experience is the leptin, which is the hunger dampening hormone or satiation hormone that says, I've had enough. And everybody's stomach has the capacity to say, I have had enough. I'm closing down now for a rest. I think that we don't exercise that enough. What I suggest to you is that you don't start off by jumping in there with starvation. I don't advocate that to anyone. It's not necessary, it's not right, and it's probably not going to do quite a lot of people any good. But that you start to experiment with your own stomach and what satiation feels like and what enough feels like, so that you can form conclusions that what is right and then when you need to have a rest from food. So there's a starting point. The problem with the calorie counting and restriction patterns of weight control that we've been used to put us in a very rigid frame of mind, and we get into a place where we restrict and we are really hard on ourselves. And ultimately, any rigidity, any rigid patterns of behavior aren't going to work for us, because we are flexible, adaptable beings, and we need to be flexible and adaptable in our food style. I think when we start to think of intermittent fasting or time-related eating, which are well exercised, these patterns of eating are very common and we hear about it all the time. We think, oh, I've got to fall into the 2 days a week of 800 calories, or I've got to fall into the 18 hours of fasting and 6 hours of eating in a day pattern. You don't have to fall into any of those patterns to start this way of life, because there is no doubt that once you adopt a time restricted eating pattern, it becomes a lifestyle. And the great thing about it is that it lasts long term. It is something that can stick. It is not something that will last for 48 hours and then you'll fall off the wagon because you've failed. What I say about time restricted eating is that you cannot fail. You simply start to work with your window of opening and closing. So you could choose to eat and experiment with 12 hours of eating in a day and 12 hours of not eating, and see how you can adapt to that. And I would suggest that's a great place to start. There will be people who can jump in there and do a really much shorter pattern. And I would say, fantastic, you do that. That's absolutely brilliant. But I know a lot of people won't. And there is no need to frighten yourself into this. Why don't you encourage yourself into this instead of putting yourself in a prison in which so many dieters exist? And I would say a prison of despair. So 12-12 is a great place to experiment. So 12 hours of eating and 12 hours of not eating. See how you do with that. Now, for some people, that will be too much of a shock. That will be too frightening. And in the spirit of change, and really what works with change are small steps forward, small achievable steps forward. Why don't you just close down food for an hour? No snacks, no intake of calories, no nothing, and see how you feel about that. Give that one a go. And I think that's a perfectly laudable and acceptable place to start this experiment. See how you feel in your body. Now, the reason I say to some people 1 hour without food is a great place to start is because of this. Not eating means not eating. And this is the important piece, and this is what makes a difference. So all the key people talking about fasting as a way for health and well-being are saying that fast means fast. So people like Sechin Panda, who talks about the circadian rhythm, and Jason Fung, who talks about the obesity code, and Jen Stevens, who does her regular intermittent fasting podcasts and has written a wonderful book on this called Fast, Feast, Repeat. They all are quite insistent about one thing, and that is when you're not eating, you're not eating. So let me tell you what that means. It means you can have water, it means you can have black coffee, and it means you can have black tea. It pretty well means you don't intake anything else, because anything else stimulates the system to think that food is being dealt with. And that's not what we're wanting to invite the body to think. So it's water, it's black tea, and it's black coffee. That's pretty well it. It is not chewing gum. It is not Diet Coke. It is not diet fizzy drinks. It is not flavored tea. It is not a piece of chocolate that you'd quietly put in your mouth because it gives you a sugar boost. It is none of those things. None of those things will encourage the body to fast. So that is where the work is. The time frame will come gradually. Now, if you give your body this incredible experience of rest and digest through no stimulation in the system of any of the hormones that arrive and turn up and start working when we take food in, more particularly the insulin hormone that works hard to process food around the body, we are not inviting that hormone to turn up and work for us. We are saying, we're closed. The shop is closed right now. The train has left the station. We're taking a break. And as I said, I'll say it one more time. If that's 1 hour with water, black tea or black coffee, you do an hour and you feel proud. Notice how you feel at the end of that hour. And this is all about noticing how you feel. Noticing how you feel from inside yourself in relation to time out from food. And that's what we start to practice. There's some beautiful studies. The Zoe people did a great study where they invited people to sign up to the 14-10 pattern of eating over some months. And a large number of people, I think it was about 35,000, signed up, and they fasted for 14 hours and they ate for 10 hours. And they accepted this no food window. And then they gave feedback, and the feedback showed that they had developments in their sense of well-being. That's a few people lost a little bit of weight on that, but not that's not a pattern for huge weight loss, but it would be for some people without question. But what a fantastic place to start. And it's a really comfortable place to start. So you could start at 14-10, you could start at 12-12. You can do 1 hour and see how it feels, and then you're on the road and get back to yourself, talk to yourself. Hey, I can do an hour now. I can develop that. If you gradually got to 12-12, you'd be doing so well, and the body, you would find, would say, thanks, that was great. And if you started that as a regular pattern of eating, you would, over time, you would start to notice fantastic results in your sense of well-being and your mind. Because the body needs, and the brain working together, need a rest from all of this digesting of food. In my book, Foodsane, I talk a lot about choices of food. So once you've got your time frame clear and you're working comfortably with that, and you're flexible with yourself, and you're kind to yourself, and you're thoughtful to yourself, you will be feeling different. But let's talk about food choices, because there's a lot around about ultra processed food, and I think that you don't need to chuck out all of the ultra processed food that is available. You just need to start to look at it. The fact of the matter is, we're pretty clear. The science is pretty clear that says give the body natural food, it will process things better and you will do better. And we all know what natural food is. It's food that's straight from the ground or straight from the tree or straight from an animal if you are a meat eater. And these products the body can process. And produced food, some food is produced very carefully and very thoughtfully. And some food, I will say it, I will use the word, we're tricked into thinking it's good food when it's not good food. And this is food that is ultra processed with high levels of fat and high levels of sugar. You don't have to chuck it out all at one time. But if, say, for example, if you're used to eating processed food, why not just add lots of vegetables to your plate rather than take something away, rather than work with the restrictive brain? Why not be generous and just add lots of vegetables to your plate and start to look at snacks like nuts and things like that? One study showed that people who had a salad as a starter ate less food. They just automatically ate about 200 calories less at each meal. But you might not be a salad person. I'm not a salad person. Dress your salad up if that's a way to help you to eat raw vegetables. Dress it up for a bit. But it's about choice, and it's about, as you respect your body more, you will be more mindful of what goes into your body. And so I don't advocate good food and bad food. It's such a trap. We need to enjoy ourselves around food. And one of the things I write about in Foodsane is food is both there to nourish us and help us function and live and stay alive, but it's also got so many levels to it. It's a huge influence on our celebration. It's a huge influence on comfort. It's a huge influence on, in fact, a conversation with all of us. You know, we talk through food. So think about your choices. And also, when you've done that, when you've worked with that, and we're talking over months, right timing is immediate. You can start to play with your time frame straight away. The right food, you can start to make a long-term experiment. When I certainly do, I mean, even though I eat a lot of great food, I still experiment to see how my stomach reacts to any kind of processed food I might like to take in. And then you can start to think about the right amount of food that you put in yourself. This for sure, you don't want to be overstuffing. It's just not good for your body, and the stomach doesn't like it. And it makes the digestive system work overtime, and it affects the organs of the body. So you don't want to be overstuffing, but that is something you can cut back gradually. And you will find, if you go back to the right timing of your food, that you will naturally be cutting back. I can confidently say you get the timing right, and the amount will also come right. Let's just think for a moment, when we're thinking about processed food, about sugar. This is one of the big pieces that you can start to play with. So if you're going on a time restricted pattern, which I advocate because it's very different to calorie counting, it also works. There's so many thousands of good results. You don't have to stop taking in sugar, but we all need to look at sugar. Fundamentally, it's a natural food, and it's lovely to eat, and we all enjoy it so much. But too much sugar is making us heavy and overweight, and it's a problem for us. We do need, all of us need to cut back and be mindful of sugar. And the more we refuse foods in supermarkets that are full of sugar, the more production companies are going to have to work with us and be more thoughtful to us and cut back their products. But sugar is a choice. So I might meet people in the course of my work who don't drink water, but they just drink sugary drinks. And, you know, one of the first things I say is, well, let's not worry about dieting, but let's just get that sugary drinks thing sorted out, because it's an absolute disaster for the body. And so I talk a lot in Foodsane about my own addiction to sugar, my own emotional relationship with sugar as a reward food, and how that stems from childhood. So it's a really good example of how childhood experience will influence what we eat. And in childhood, sugar for me was fantastic reward. It said so many things. It said that I was loved. And believe it or not, it wouldn't be something that children drink these days. But we didn't have fizzy drinks, but we had tea with sugar in. And I was drinking that certainly by the age of 5. And not surprisingly, sugar became something that I turned to. I could eat little, but I would always be having sugar. And that became a crazy addiction that caused me a lot of problems. I am not addicted to sugar any longer. I actually don't like large intakes of sugar, but it's taken me a long time to ease myself away from that. The first thing I had to do was to be able to say to myself that I actually had a problem with sugar. And that was a hard thing to say. It was a hard thing to notice because I was actually hiding it from myself. And another factor in Foodsane that I talk about is how we manage to hide these problems from ourselves. We are so good at it. Probably the human mind is the only type of mind that sort of says, I've got a problem and I'm not looking at it. I'm actually sort of going to pretend that's not happening. And I certainly describe that in acute detail. So any of you that think that might apply to you, then do have a read. And I hope that my story motivates you. So let's have a sum up here of some of the key areas that I can direct you in to help you out if you're one of the people having this struggle. There's so much to say on the matter, and it can hardly be done justice in this small podcast, but we can make a start. I would love to just reassure you that there are new pathways forward for weight loss and you can do it. You absolutely can. Foodsane goes into a great deal of depth about what motivates us, how we can support ourselves to lose weight, and the best scientific routes for weight loss that will become a way of life and which you can embrace. Even if you haven't got a weight problem, if you're a person that's always watching food, certainly the routes that I suggest will make you enjoy food again and have a great relationship with food. We can enjoy our food. We don't have to be lifetime dieters and restrictors. So some key points that I make are this, that first of all, if you're going to make a change, to do it from a place of shame and judgment based on what you've experienced or based on the way you talk to yourself is not going to help. And it is really time for us to have more compassion towards people that struggle with their weight. There is a lot of evidence that suggests that obesity is only a tiny bit to do with food in and food out and calories in and calories out of your system. And that is a lot to do with our food environment and a lot to do with our biology and our history and our hormones and our age. So stop judging yourself and start being your own best friend on this, which is a general metaphor for psychotherapy anyway. The second step that I would say is that small steps count. And what we tend to do when we get worried and anxious and stressed, or we jump on the scales and we realize we put on weight, you start to panic and you go on a restriction diet that lasts for a short amount of time and then you fail. You can make small steps. And I suggest that the first step that you start to take is that you start to notice what you are doing, not what it is you think you should be doing. And particularly start to notice your time frame. And I would say to you, as a third step forward, start to look at your time frame and start to ensure that you have rest time from food that is clear from food. And I gave you information about what that means. It means water, black tea, or black coffee. It doesn't mean anything else. It doesn't mean chocolate or nuts or beverages with milk in, or coffee with cream in, or chewing gum or sweeties or anything. It does not. It means you are resting and fasting and that the train leaves the station and that you stop eating for a while. And I really would encourage you, as a different way forward, that you start looking at your time frame and notice what your time frame, your natural time frame is for eating, what your natural preference is, your natural rhythm, and take it from there and see if you could start to have a well-balanced time frame for eating. That will take you forward. And as I say, another clear step that is being clearly indicated is that fasting means fasting. And I've explained to you that doesn't have to feel bad. As we get used to these spaces, we work with the leptin, or the hormone in our system that helps us to feel satisfied and that we've completed and that we've done and we don't actually want any more food. And as you develop that relationship with feeling satisfied, you will get better and better at stopping eating, and you will literally have an experience that says, I don't want food anymore until my next eating window is open. And then you will be extremely pleased with yourself. Now, if you are taking weight loss drugs, as I've said, please do that under medical supervision. But you will have an extreme experience of leptin in your body, and that is what these drugs induce in you, and you will not want to eat a lot at all. But you still have to get used to the experience of not eating, and that's a big psychological journey. So perhaps Foodsane is going to be extremely useful for you if you're on the Wegovy type route of weight loss drugs that are around today. And as I say, I don't mind how you choose to get on the train. You get on the train and you feel good about it, and make sure that it's an endurable, that it's sustainable, and that it serves you without making you put on more weight. And Foodsane goes into a lot of detail on that. And finally, I would say to you that your body is not a skip. Your body is not a trash can. Stop just throwing any old stuff into your body. And if you start to watch your time and you start to get some rest from food, and as I have said, even if it's only just 1 hour that you experience of rest from food, and I know that there are plenty of people where 1 hour is a big learning experience, and big respect to you if that is who you are, because it's a great place to start. Even if you only take that hour and you start to get that feeling of your stomach and the connection between your brain and your stomach and what your body is all the time telling you, then you will start to make progress. So it's not any longer about the latest, what kind of food can you eat diet. It's not about restriction, and it's certainly not about super amounts of exercise either, because in Foodsane I talk about plenty of evidence to suggest that exercise isn't a great way to lose weight for a lot of people. It is for some people. Some people are built that way, but others are not. And you don't need to be killing yourself at the gym in order to lose weight. In fact, if you lighten up your exercise load, you're likely to do well. But it's all in the book, which is going to be out in June. We'll give you another warning when it's coming, and I really hope you're going to enjoy that. And what I have wanted, my real motivation in that book, is to help people find the pivotal point at which they say to themselves, I'm doing this and I can do it. I absolutely want that for people. I'm really looking forward to talking to you again in my next podcast. Have a great week, and I'll see you again soon. These podcasts are developed and produced by Tamsin Carter at pinto.com. She does a great job of getting my podcasts ready every week, and I highly recommend her work. Bye. Thank you for listening. Check out the next episode on our platform. Don't forget, I'm a doctor of psychotherapy, not medicine or clinical psychology. My expertise lies in the field of applied psychology through psychotherapeutic models of practice. This podcast is not intended for diagnosis or treatment of any kind. If you are concerned about your mental health, do consult your doctor, who will guide you. If you are ever in a mental health crisis within the UK, dial 999. In all other parts of the world, check your mental health facilities or turn to someone who will support you.